Hello and welcome to Lutherans Alive. This is the program that seeks to tell the stories of Lutheran Christians and our ministries here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. We do so joyfully, believing that God has done wonderful things for us and is doing wonderful things through us. I'm Pastor Tony Schneck, pleased to be your host on the program, and today we have with us Amy Santoriello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm fine, Amy. Thanks for being here on the program today. Amy grew up in Penn Hills and was a member of Zion Lutheran in Penn Hills, if I have that correctly, but is now serving at Faith in White Oak and also the Lutheran congregation in Hazelwood.
Yes.
And Amy is serving as a diaconal minister. And Amy, for our viewers who may be unfamiliar with some of our terminology, can you say a few things at the beginning here about what exactly a diaconal minister is?
Well, diaconal ministry is one of our 3 word and service rosters in the ELCA, and diaconal ministers serve in a variety of contexts, usually in a more specialized ministry, but we are rooted in the community as our main focus, as well as grounded in Scripture and all of the other good stuff that comes along with being rostered in the church. My particular specialization has been youth and young adult ministry, so that's a lot of what I do. Sometimes I describe my job as being the Girl Friday in a congregation. I pick up all the little pieces that need to get done.
Okay. And could you say a few things before we go into more about what you're doing now? Could you say a few things about your journey and how it was that you got to this point? How did God lead you to the point where you became consecrated as a diaconal minister?
I was teaching kindergarten. I taught school for a total of 8 years, but while I was teaching kindergarten, I was also the youth director in my home congregation, and I noticed that there were no people my age in church, and this really, really bothered me. I was confirmed with a group of 18 other people that were my age, and the fact that none of them were there or connected with a faith community as an adult really bothered me. So I started doing some digging and looking around and really doing a lot of discernment, both in my congregation and in our cluster and across the Synod, about what was going on for young adults in the church. And during that process, I was part of the young adult team that Churchwide assembled to look at this. And it was during that process I realized teaching probably wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. I loved my children and I loved the art of teaching, but I felt called to do something else. And so I started to look at seminaries and looked at all 8 of our Lutheran seminaries. And when I looked at Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, I said, I really want to talk about young adult ministry. And the head of the youth and family program there said, well, nobody's talking about that, so why don't you come here and we will. So I ended up at Luther for 3 years, and I actually started the MDiv process to get ordained because I didn't know what else to do. We didn't have a real good understanding of what those other rosters were, and they weren't explained to me very well. I didn't have real good models of what other forms of ministry could be. So there was a discernment process that happened for me in seminary, and I honestly will say it was my worship class that put me over the edge, because I thought if I have to plan worship every week for the rest of my life, I'm not going to be real happy. At the same time, I had gone to a conference about immigration in the border region around Tijuana and San Diego. And I met with lots of people who were doing work that I felt called to do, more of that work that was at the borders of the church and society. So came back to seminary, met with my advisor, and changed my course of study a little bit, and followed the diaconal ministry track from there.
It seems to me that part of the discernment process is sort of finding out not only where your gifts are, but what it is that you're passionate about. And, of course, something like worship is very important, very central to our life together as the church, but if you discern that that's not where your gifts are, but your gifts and your passion lie elsewhere, then by all means that is probably where the Spirit is leading you. And obviously that's where the Spirit has led you, and that's what you find yourself doing now.
Yes.
All right. And That's wonderful. That's great. Now, that process can sometimes take a little time.
For me, it took a long time. It usually takes about 4 years. It took 8.
Okay.
It's a slow process, but
Right.
God gives us reasons to be patient when we need to learn how to be patient.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he got you where you needed to be.
Yes.
Good, good. So what sorts of things do you find yourself doing in the areas of Christian education, youth ministry, and service to the community there at White Oak and Hazelwood?
Well, at Faith, my primary responsibilities are Christian education, youth ministry, social ministry, and then a large chunk of my call is to be the chief administrator for Mission on the Mon. And for those of you out there who haven't heard of Mission on the Mon is a week-long immersion experience into McKeesport to do mission work. And we bring in youth not just from our synod, but from all over the country that come in, and we do some service learning projects that are not just focused on missions of mercy and building projects, but looking at how justice is carried out in our community. So everything from literacy programs and feeding programs to building programs. And this year we're working on a community garden. Last year we spent a lot of time at the library working with their literacy program. So that's a large part of what I'm doing now. And I love it. I can't imagine doing anything else. In Hazelwood, I have a quarter-time position there, and there's a lot to be done. I spend a lot of time walking the streets and just getting to know people in the community. A few weeks ago, I sat at the bus stop and just talked to people about how the bus cuts were affecting their lives, and where the church should be part of that conversation.
And Mission on the Mon has been going on for a few years now.
Well, it was planned for 3 years ago, and it didn't happen. But this is our second year to actually carry it out.
And you spoke about how an experience like this is meant not just to do some work that week, as important as that week, as important as that work is, but to also talk about maybe the root of the problems in the community and the economic issues and perhaps justice issues and things like that. So that's a part of the week as well, you said.
Yes, for example, we had a group of young women who all chose to do the library project, and they put together a literacy program during the week. One of the young women who was from the community decided that this was a calling that she had, and she now goes every month and does a literacy program with the children's librarian. So it isn't just, oh, the kids came for the week and that was nice. They put up some handicap ramps and planted some flowers. There's an ongoing relationship that's being built in the community, and really looking at how do we make the lives, how do we work together as a community all year with people's lives all year, 52 weeks a year instead of just one.
And a lot of groups, a lot of congregations from our synod do travel elsewhere to do mission trips, and there's certainly a great value in that. There are a lot of bonding experiences that take place during those trips. It's a wonderful way for youth groups and even adults too to sort of come together as we travel together. But here's an opportunity that's much closer to home, where we can make a difference in our own backyard too, and that may be an experience that suits many youth groups for their annual mission trip.
Right, and it's a very affordable program, and part of the goal was that we have so many small congregations that can't get a whole group to go on a mission trip. I know, you have to have a certain number of kids and a certain number of adults. If you have one young person who wants to go on a mission trip, you don't even need to find an adult because it's right here in our synod. You can send one kid to Mission on the Mon or 2 kids to Mission on the Mon in a way that you couldn't send them across the country.
And there'd be enough adults to help out.
Right.
Amy, we're going to take a short break here on Lutherans Alive. More about Mission on the Mon and other things that are going on there in the Mon Valley right after we take a break. Thank you. Welcome back to Lutherans Alive. We're glad you're with us, and we're also glad to have Amy Santoriello with us today. Amy's a diaconal minister serving in our White Oak and Hazelwood congregations. Amy, we were talking briefly about a diaconal minister and what exactly a diaconal minister is. Different than an ordained minister of word and sacrament, a different role in the church, no less important, but it's certainly a different role. We talk about ordained ministry in terms of word and sacrament ministry. We talk about diaconal ministry in terms of word and service. Could you say a few things about what that means to you and what that means to others in the diaconate?
Well, the roots of the diaconate really come straight from Scripture. We know that St. Stephen was a deacon, our first martyr, and the concept of service ministry comes directly from John, where Christ takes off his outer robe, takes a towel, wraps it around his waist, and washes the feet of the disciples. And that is the reason that a towel is the symbol of diaconal ministry. If you ever see a diaconal minister assisting in worship, instead of a stole, they normally have a towel tucked into their cincture there. And some of them are beautiful towels, and some of them are just very functional terry cloth towels. They kind of run the gamut. So that idea that Christ served as servant, and we are to live out servanthood in the world for God's world, is the diaconal kind of umbrella. So word and service really is how do we live with one foot in the world of the church and one foot in the world, in the secular world, and one foot in the world that's suffering. Personally, I like to think of the diaconal ministers. We're supposed to be standing on the boundary of those two worlds, but we're interpreting those worlds to one another. And for a long time, people have said, well, diaconal ministers interpret the church to the world, and I really think it has to go both ways. Diaconal ministers interpret society to the church, and that's what we do.
That story of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples has such a prominent place that it's read on Maundy Thursday every year in the midst of Holy Week, in the midst of the holiest week of the entire year, which says to me that that's a pretty important story and has such an important place that servanthood is important, and that Jesus came not to be served but to serve. The Son of Man came to be a servant, Jesus said. And it's so very, very important. And it's certainly something that all Christians are called to do, whether you're ordained or whether you're a deacon or a deaconess or a diaconal ministry, or whether you're a lay person not rostered on any roster. But all Christians are called to serve in some way. You spoke earlier about some of the things that you're passionate about in your service, young people, young adults being one of them. Could you say something about, could you say some more about that? What is it, do you think, do you have some thoughts about why our young adults are not coming to
Well,
worship?
the show isn't that long. So the short version, the short version is actually that we, by the age of 10, decide subconsciously whether or not we're going to be part of a faith community. And we have to have about 10 good faith experiences by age 10. So the root of the issue with young adult ministry is actually an issue that we have with children's ministry and Christian education as a whole. The world of young adulthood has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. We're living in a postmodern society where really our roles are less clearly defined. 50 years ago, your citizenship and your standing in the community was connected to your faith community. And all of your world sort of interconnected, your work world and your family world and your friends world and your leisure time and your academics were all focused together. And that's not the world we live in anymore. So the way we identify ourselves has changed, and faith community has become less and less part of that because of the expectations of society. And something that has always frustrated me is when I talk to people about young adulthood and young families, So we said, well, I don't understand why they don't have time for church. Well, if 50 years ago there was somebody that stayed at home in the family that did all of the chores during the week while somebody went out and worked, and now both adults go out and work, when are those chores happening? Right, something's getting lost, and it might be church. But it's other things as well. It isn't just the church. But we have not sought connection in the same way that we seek connection today. That's a large part of it. But in many ways, young people see the church as not living out their faith, but being, I don't want to say too preachy, because I don't think that's the right word, but we are often seen as being all about talk and not about how are we moving in the world and how are we living out our Christian faith from day to day.
Yeah, the church is more than just an institution, but the living, breathing people of God, and that we do have adults who are hopefully good role models and examples, and people who are living out their faith and are taking it seriously, and that it is a part of our lives, and that we're living it. And we can provide those role models for young people. We need to be those role models for younger people. And that age group between 18 and 24 is an important one in that a lot of people are struggling at that point with what to believe and what is my place and what is God calling me to do. And it's just such an important age that we need to tap.
And we haven't stepped up to the plate and said, here, let's talk about vocation. And let's talk about vocation from the time you're 8 years old. And what is our vocation in the world? That's one thing, and we have such visual representation of some places where we maybe aren't living out our faith. And I always use this as an example. So I apologize for the overuse of this as an example. We have a beautiful statement about the care of creation. And I can't tell you how many congregations I've walked into and am served something on a styrofoam plate. And so if just that small of a thing is what somebody is seeing about how we're living out our Christian faith, what are the bigger things that they're seeing that the church is misconnecting on?
Yeah, we have to take it pretty seriously. One of the ways that the church is trying to reach that age demographic, as well as other age demographics, is something called the emergent church movement. You've done a little bit of work in that area with the emergent church. Can you say some things about what is that? What is the emergent church?
Emergent church is more of a grassroots way of looking at church and not looking at the hierarchical structure of the church. And it's something that is not defined by denomination necessarily, but the way that life is being lived in our world today. It's really the postmodern understanding of the way that we're church rather than the modern understanding of the way that we do church. As I said before, the church as an institution is very grounded still in the modern ideals of everybody being connected and all of your spheres of influence being connected. And postmodern world is not anymore. And the biggest thing about the emergent church is that it's very permission giving. So if a group of people want to act on their faith and they see a homeless community that has gathered under a bridge, they don't wait for permission to go and talk to them and hand out socks and feed people. It's living out who we are as Christians to go down and say, hey, we're here to just chat and be in relationship with you. And it's amazing that worship communities grow out of that.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. But first, we need to take another break here on Lutherans Alive. We'll be back with more with Amy Santoriello after this. Welcome back to Lutherans Alive. We're continuing our conversation with Amy Santoriello, who serves as a diaconal minister in our White Oak and Hazelwood congregations. We were talking before the break, Amy, about something called the emergent church movement and what that is and how it's a little bit difficult to describe, but could you say a little more about what it looks like? Like, for example, what does when an emergent community comes together to worship, it doesn't, as I understand it, it doesn't look like our traditional liturgy that we use.
It might not look like our traditional liturgy. It might look very much like an even more traditional liturgy than we're used to seeing in our congregations. So it can run the gamut. I have been in emergent congregations that have a flat-out bluegrass feel to them. I served a congregation actually that was a completely rock and roll congregation. We had a liturgy set to Beatles tunes. I've been in emergent congregations that you would think you were in the catacombs in Rome. So to say, well, what does an emergent church look like if I was going to build an emergent congregation as a model? That would be a really hard thing to do. But the idea is that there is meaning behind the things that are done. It isn't just, oh, well, we say the Apostles' Creed because that's what we've done for 500 years. But we say the Apostles' Creed because this is what we believe. Or trying to think of some specifics, but we do this one thing because this is important to our community, not just to the church as a whole, and because somebody put it in the Lutheran Book of Worship to do it. And there's more explanation and teaching that goes into designing worship services in an emergent congregation. So the congregation that I served in the Twin Cities during seminary, one of the things that we did on Good Friday was to do a crosswalk, and we did the Stations of the Cross, carrying a large railroad tie cross down the main drag of Minneapolis, and stopping to do the Stations of the Cross was very important to that community. But once we got to where we were going, the worship service wasn't a tenebrae service. It was learning stations based on the last words of Christ, and there were more hands-on activities to do at each one of those stations. So it could look something very traditional, but could also be more of a learning experience as well. And it doesn't have to be a learning experience. It could very much just be a good old Ash Wednesday straight out of the ELW worship service. It's more of the ideal of how the church lives out its mission during the week and not just on Sundays.
And my guess is, too, that context is also very important. Mm-hmm. If you have a congregation of people who really resonate with bluegrass music or some Beatles tunes, then that's going to fit very well in that community, and that those people are going to worship in that way.
I mean, Taizé is something that speaks to me, but I don't necessarily think it speaks to everyone. Or I enjoyed going to and found meaning in a rock and roll service. I was on vacation with my family, and I was singing along to the radio, or the singer that was in a bar with my cousins, and my cousin looked at me and he's like, "How do you know this song?" I was like, "Oh, we sing this song in church." He was like, "What?" Maybe I should check out that church. And he hadn't been in church for years and came and checked it out and found meaning in that. So it's a little bit more of an understanding that we have different learning modalities and different spiritual modalities as well. So emergent congregations sort of seek to meet those modalities as well.
In terms of your own spiritual journey, in what ways have you grown in your own faith since you became a diaconal minister? What's been the most meaningful part of this part of your journey?
For me, the process was not an easy one. Our institutional church hasn't quite figured out what to do with word and service people yet. The roster of diaconal minister is only began in 1993, so I have to explain a lot what it is to people. So that's been part of that journey, was when you have to explain something enough, it cements it a little bit better for you. I also, after seminary, took a position in Florida that I thought was my dream position. Moved down there, got all settled, and then lost the funding for my position. So I was without a internship and income and all of those wonderful things for about 2 years before I moved back home and was working at a fabric store. And I honestly have to say I enjoyed working at a fabric store. I used to joke about having 27 years of education to cut fabric. But that was all part of the journey, was that time to kind of really cement that I was called to do service work. And about 2 years after not feeling connected to the church at all, I prayed and said, God, give me a sign that I'm either supposed to stay or supposed to leave. And 2 days later, I got a phone call offering me the position at Faith. So I have to say I learned to be on God's time and not my own.
Amy, it sounds like God got you where He wanted you to be, even if it took a little while, even if it seemed to take a little while. But we're thankful that you are where you are in those communities, and thanks for your service and all that you're doing. And thanks for being here today on Lutherans Alive. And thank you for watching today here on Lutherans Alive. We know that from wherever you're watching, whether it's in White Oak or Hazelwood or wherever you happen to be, there's a Lutheran congregation in or near your neighborhood that would be very pleased to welcome you. Won't you come and worship with us? And won't you watch us next time on Lutherans Alive?